Romance of the Three Kingdoms Chapter 13. Li Ju and Guosi fall out, while Yang Feng and Dong Qing rescue the emperor. They return him to the old capital at Luoyang. In desperation, Lu Bu turns for help first to Yuan Shao, but he refuses and instead goes to support Cao Cao. So Lu Bu turns to Xuanda. As it was Lu Bu's attack on Cao Cao's army that caused the siege of Shuzhou to be lifted, Xuanda offers him sanctuary. Not that this pleases Zhang Fei, to put it mildly. In fact, during a banquet that Lu Bu holds to thank Xuanda, Zhang Fei takes violent offense at the way Lu Bu addresses Xuanda. Arising from his seat and roaring with anger, Zhang Fei challenges Lu Bu to a duel of 300 rounds. Xuanda commands him to hold his tongue, and Guan Yu shoves him roughly out of the room. Undeterred, Zhang Fei later again challenges Lu Bu. A furious Xuanda has to personally go and reprimand him. Not that Zhang Fei shows the slightest remorse, for he hates Lu Bu with a vengeance. When the triumphant Cao Cao reports his victories over Lu Bu to the imperial court at Chang'an, he is rewarded and honored with various new titles and roles. But the imperial court is not in good shape. The rebel leaders Li Ju and Guosi are ruthlessly exploiting the power they have seized. The whole court lives in fear of them. The emperor is in despair. Not even the suggestion that Cao Cao as a famous hero could attack the rebels can console the emperor. Such is the state of affairs when Yang Biao, one of the ministers, comes up with a plan. Knowing that Guosi's wife is very jealous, he decides to exploit this. He also knows that most evenings Li Ju and Guosi dine together to discuss matters, often drinking and talking late into the evening. He sets out to cause a rupture in the relationship between them. Yang Biao's plan is to send his wife, the Lady Yang, to visit the wife of Guosi, Lady Guo, and to sow the seeds of distrust. During the conversation, Lady Yang lets slip that she understands that Guosi is having an affair with the wife of Li Ju. "Imagine, my lady," says Lady Yang, "if Li finds out. You must do all in your power to stop your husband having this affair." Needless to say, Lady Guo is furious. "So that is where he is in the evenings. Rest assured," she says, "I'll deal with this." It is a few days later, in the early evening, when Guosi is getting ready to visit Li Ju for their usual planning meeting, that Lady Guo tries to stop him. "You cannot trust Li Ju," she says. "Is there really space at the top for two ambitious men? What if he were to murder you? What would become of me?" Swayed by her concern, he is persuaded to stay home that evening. However, Li Ju sends over the dinner that had been prepared for Guo. Lady Guo, determined to undermine what she believes is an affair, slips some poison into the food, and just as Guo is about to eat it, she cries, "No. We cannot trust this food sent from outside." So saying, she gives a little of the food to their pet dog, who convulses in agony and dies before their very eyes. From that day forward, Guosi never trusts Li Ju again. Another time, Li Ju and Guosi have been drinking to excess, and this gives Guosi indigestion. Lady Guo is able to persuade him that he has been poisoned by Li Ju. In revenge, he plans to launch his branch of the rebel army in an attack on Li Ju. When word of this reaches Li Ju, he decides to strike first. In the mayhem that ensues when the two groups of soldiers clash, Li Ju orders his nephew Li Xian to break off and secretly capture the emperor and the empress. Taking everyone in the palace by surprise, the young man is successful. He seizes the emperor and empress, and takes them to Li Ju's camp. When, as a result of the fighting, Guosi captures the palace, he discovers this added betrayal. He imprisons the remaining court officials, and in his fury he burns the palace to the ground. Li Xian takes the imperial couple to the palace at Meiwu. Here he dismisses almost all their staff and reduces the imperial pair to living in poverty. So bad do things become that they have barely enough food to keep them alive. For 2 months, Guo's and Li's men battle with each other. Despite various attempts at mediation, not least in order to secure the release of the imperial couple, nothing results but endless, futile bloodshed. By various means, the emperor's supporters weaken Li Ju's hold, for example, telling the various troops of tribal soldiers that they have the emperor's permission to go home. Li Ju is a great fan of women shamans. Invited to the palace, they go into mystical trances and offer him advice as if from the gods themselves. His generals feel that no matter what military successes they might achieve, credit is always given to the shamans, and this too feeds resentment within his army. However, attempts at assassination fail, most dramatically that of Yang Feng and Song Gua. They have helped Li Ju in his various campaigns. But they have also watched as the Chang tribesmen troops started to slip away, disenchanted by Li Ju's leadership and reassured that the emperor had given them permission to go. They resent the fact that the women shamans are given all the credit, and so they decide to kill Li Ju and rescue the emperor. But they are overheard. Songhua, inside the city, is seized and beheaded, while Yang Feng, waiting with his men outside the city for the signal to attack, is suddenly confronted by a furious Li Ju and his men but manages to escape. Into this chaos rides Zhang Ji from Shaanxi with a huge army, determined to end this war and reconcile the two sides. By now Li Ju's army has largely faded away, and Guixi's position is so weak he is unable to exert any real influence. Through Zhang Ji's diplomacy at long last the warfare ends. As a result, Zhang Ji is able to present a memorial to the emperor. Zhang Ji argues that the emperor will be much safer if he moves to the eastern capital of Hongnou. The emperor is delighted with this proposal. Zhang Ji negotiates a compromise between the two rebel leaders. Li Ju will organize the carriages to convey the imperial couple to Hongnou with a couple of hundred guards, while Guixi releases the imprisoned court officials. But all is not as it seems. Guixi goes back on his word. An order from him to hold up the imperial entourage at the Bailing Bridge is foiled when his own guards let the emperor cross. Furious at this disobedience, Guixi decides personally to stop the emperor and sets off after him with an armed force. Just as the convoy reaches Huayin County, Guixi rides up, demanding that the convoy be brought to a halt. The emperor is beside himself with fear, saying, "Alas! Out of the wolf's lair and now into the tiger's mouth." When it seems to the desperate emperor that there is no hope left, and as Guixi's men draw closer, a thunderous roll of drums is heard. Onto the scene rides another armed force with a banner unfurled, proclaiming that this troop are men of Yang Feng the mighty Han. Having survived fleeing from Li Ju, he has taken up refuge in the hills of the Zhongnan Mountains and has come to help protect his emperor. Riding to the attack, Yang Feng's men drive Guixi and his men off. The emperor, upon being introduced to his champion, says, "It's the greatest of services that you have performed for us. We owe you our lives." Yang Feng kowtows and thanks the emperor for his gracious words. Guixi tries one final time to attack and capture the emperor but is once again defeated by Yang Feng. He in turn is assisted by yet another surprise arrival, Dong Qing, a relative of the emperor. Undaunted, Guixi now teams up with Li Ju for fear that with Zhang Ji in charge at Chang'an and Yang Feng en route to Hongnou, the two rebels could soon find themselves powerless and facing destruction. So they decide to ride for Hongnou in order to murder the emperor. They cut a path of utter devastation on the way to Hongnou and overtake Yang Feng, Dongqing and the imperial convoy, who are resting in the city of Dongjian. The loyal troops are overwhelmed by the rebel army, and it becomes clear that they cannot hold them back and that they will seize the city itself. Yang Feng and Dongqing are barely able to get the imperial couple safely out of the city before it is overrun. The rest of the imperial convoy is captured by Li Ju and Guixi. Dongjian is looted and destroyed, and it is a miracle that the emperor is able to escape to Shanbei. But close behind come Li Ju and Guixi. In desperation, Yang and Dong try to both pacify Li and Gua and at the same time raise an army to fight back. To do this they have to approach a splinter movement of the yellow headbands known as the White Wave. Among their leaders is one Liu, through whose inspired leadership many rebels come forward to join the defense of the emperor. Despite this new army, Li Ju and Guixi push on, defeating the White Wave troops and seizing Hongnou. There they slaughter the old and the weak and force the healthy men to join their army. The fall of Hongnou forces the emperor to flee once again, this time to the north. It is Liu who on the banks of the Yellow River finds a small boat to ferry the emperor and empress across to safety. This leaves the emperor with but a handful of servants and Liu and Yang Feng, who tries his best to care for the imperial couple. Commandeering a farm wagon, he manages to get the couple to the town of Daong, but there is nothing there for them to eat. Pressing on, they spend the night in a rough farm hut, and though the local peasants offer them food, it is so coarse they cannot eat it. Eventually the sad procession arrives in Ani, but here there are no grand buildings, just simple, one-story huts. It is in one of these that the imperial couple at last rest. It is at this point that Liu shows his true nature and begins to bully everyone, attacking the courtiers and denouncing people before the throne for no reason whatsoever. The food and drink he gives to the emperor is deliberately of poor quality, and he forces the emperor to appoint other white wave leaders to positions of authority. The court has reached its lowest ebb yet. However, the mission to reconcile Li Ju and Guisi in order to protect the emperor is eventually successful. At last governors from across China are able to send supplies to the imperial couple. But it is a time of terrible famine. Yang Feng and Dongqing have decided to return the emperor to the original capital of Luoyang, a move opposed by Liu. Despite this, Yang Feng and Dongqing set off with the emperor for Luoyang. It is now that Liu turns traitor. He has decided to collaborate with Li Ju and Guisi and seize the emperor as he travels. Hearing of the plot, Yang Feng and Dongqing race ahead with the imperial couple, forcing Liu to attack on his own without the support of the other rebels. At night, at the Jiguan mountain pass, he overtakes the emperor, shouting, "No further!" Here are Li Ju and Guisi. The emperor is terrified, quivering with fear as torches descend into the pass, lighting up the night. The rebels, once divided in two, were now three joined in union. What is to become of the emperor?